Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Jeremy Smith, and I'm with GrantStation's online education team. I'll be your host for today's webinar, and that's establishing a 501c3 for your church or ministry. Now, your presenter for today will be Aretha Simons, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about her before we officially begin. She is a retired Navy veteran with extensive experience in nonprofit setup, grant writing, and grant review spanning over 20 years. She's conducted workshops and seminars across the nation for colleges, for churches, and conferences, including many renowned organizations like the Disney Entrepreneur Center, the Department of Labor, SCORE, Bishop T.D. Jakes International Pastors and Leaders Conference, Life Christian University and Seminary, and TechSoup Global Network, just to name a few. And today, she's your presenter. Here she is, Aretha Simons.
Thank you. So nice. I love your voice. I can listen to it all day. But today you guys have me. So before I get started, I want to thank GrantStation for this opportunity. I just find it incredible that people who I know, you probably have a 501c3, and that's why you're a member of GrantStation, but you may be thinking of getting another one. So I'm excited that you're here for this webinar. One disclaimer I do want to make: I am not an attorney, so I cannot provide you any legal advice. However, I've been doing 501c3s for 27 years, so I kind of know a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and get right into it. I'm going to talk about the agenda for today. We're going to talk about 501c3 or not, to have one or not. And then we're going to talk about a separate 501c3, which is the part that I'm really excited for. And then we're going to talk about the steps to obtain a 501c3. For those of you who already know, you can just kind of, pause on that little part. And then I'm going to answer your questions. As Jeremy said, I'd love for you to put your questions in the Q&A, but feel free to put them in the chat as we go along. So now, before I get started, I kind of want to know who's here today. So it's a quick poll question. Does your church have a 501c3 status? So if you are a part of a church, does your church have a 501c3 status? If you can do a little poll real quick, and then we'll get the results. Okay, lots of people do. Excellent. We're at almost 60% do, but 40% no. So this is good. This is good. I want to take a screenshot of that. Are you able to take a screenshot of that? Let me see if I can do that, because
I can do anything you need me to do, Aretha.
awesome.
That's the whole reason I'm here at GrantStation.
I love it. See, I love it. I love it. I love it. Oh, so this is good. And I wanted to find out just to see where we're going, because if everybody had a 501c3, then there's no point in talking about the church part. So we have some people who don't and some people who do. So those of you who do, kind of say, okay, I knew that, or maybe share some tips in the chat, because this is not just me being here, it's you. We're here together. So let's share everything that we know. Feel free to put it in the chat. And so I think you're sharing the results, Jeremy. Okay, so we got the results, so you guys can see that. So a lot of people do not have the church 501c3. And again, we're going to get into that in just a moment. But let's talk about 501c3, not or yes. I want to share with you what the IRS says, because for those of you who do not have the 501c3, I took this from the publication that directly from the IRS website. And when you get the video replay, you're going to have a hyperlink so you can read the hundreds of pages of what the IRS says. But here's one point that I want to make: the automatic exemption for churches. Now, really pay attention to this part, because I get a lot of people say, oh, we don't need a 501c3 because the IRS says churches don't need a 501c3. And that part is partially true, because your tithes and offerings are not taxed. So that's why the church does not need the 501c3. However, here's what the IRS says: churches that meet the requirements for IRC, Internal Revenue Code, Section 501c3, are automatically considered tax exempt and are not required to apply for and obtain recognition of tax exempt status from the IRS. This is really important. And I'm going to take my time and read this. Although there is no requirement to do so, many churches seek recognition of tax exempt status from the IRS because this recognition assures church leaders, members, and contributors that the church is recognized as exempt and qualifies for related tax benefit. That's the key part that I want you to consider. The church is exempt from paying taxes on the tithes and offerings, but there are other related tax benefits, which is the reason why churches should apply for 501c3 if you want to. I'm not here to convince you either way, but just think about it. Here's the next part that I highlighted for you. For example, contributors to a church, whether that's me, you, Walmart, Target, that has been recognized as tax exempt would know that their contributions are generally tax deductible. So I said a lot there. I hope it didn't sound like Charlie Brown school teacher teaching, want, because I really want you to hear this, because you get some churches say, I don't want the 501c3, I don't want the IRS in our business, blah, blah, blah. But as you know, there's no such thing as not being your business. I mean, we're sitting here on Zoom. I mean, Zoom is recording this behind, the walls of the cloud. So let's not talk about that part about the IRS being your business. The main part is, do you or do you not need the 501c3? Again, your contributors, whether it's you, me, whoever donates to the church, would be able to write on the taxes. So here's the second thing that I want you to see that the IRS says, because this is important. And I love how they use words generally, maybe. Churches and religious organizations, like many other charitable organizations, qualify for exempt from federal income tax and are generally, the word generally is like sometimes, eligible to receive tax deduction contributions. To qualify for exempt status, the organization must meet the following requirements. And those are the requirements for you who are, a church. You have to be doing it for religious purposes. So I'm not gonna, read all of those again. That link to that publication is on the slide. So I definitely want you to look at that. So the reason why I said to not or have to have the 501c3 or not have the 501c3 is something that you definitely have to consider. I've seen in some states, like in Florida, for example, a church does not have to have the 501c3 in order not to pay sales tax on their building, on purchases. Florida has a separate form for churches to file, as long as you show proof of your building location, that you're incorporated, that you have an EIN, and you have a utility bill in the organization's name. But then there are some states that say, no, you must have the official 501c3 approval letter from the IRS in order to rent this building. And then some states are like, nope, all you have to do is be incorporated and have the EIN. So every state is different. Again, that's why the IRS says churches are generally eligible to receive, because the IRS and the state, they do not talk to each other. So we'll get into that in a few more moments when we look at the incorporation process. So again, I was talking about, sorry about that, 501c3 or not have a 501c3. That's a conversation that you and your board members and your members who make the business decisions of the churches should have a conversation. Again, went a little further ahead. So now let's talk about the separate 501c3, because really that's what I really want to talk about, because you're here at Grant Station. So the title of this webinar was Establishing a 501c3 for your church or ministry, but I want to talk about having a separate 501c3. And we're going to talk about some of the reasons why. I want to see in the chat, I see somebody already put that they're a faith-based grant consultant in Chicago. They sent that directly to me. So I'm glad you are here. We're going to be talking about some of that, because here's some of the reasons why a church should have a separate 501c3. Before I talk about why, let's do this quick poll real quick. Do you currently have a separate 501c3 from your church? Do you currently have a separate 501c3 from your church? I would love to see what the results are. Awesome. I love this. All the grant writers are here. Love it, love it, love it, which we need you. So a lot of people are saying no, they do not have a separate 501c3. And I'm glad you're here. I am glad you are here. So we're almost, give this for another 30 seconds. Another 30 seconds. And so 21% say that you do have a separate 501c3, and 80% say that you do not have a separate 501c3. Wow, you're in the right place at the right time. I'm going to stop sharing this on my screen, and you guys have seen the results. So you see that a lot of people do not. So let's talk about some of the benefits for the separate 501c3. And you see, one of my favorite quotes is, unless somebody like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's just not. And so this is why I always recommend for a church to have a separate 501c3. And here are just a few of the reasons. So first of all, grants. As a church, if you've ever tried to get a grant and you see some of the requirements on the RFP and it says no religious organization, you're automatically disqualified. I know you've seen tons of them where they say no religious organization. I mean, that's their decision. I mean, there are 1.5 million nonprofit 501c3s in the US, but imagine how many churches there are and how many different religions there are, over 400 denominations, the last that I heard. So think about that. A corporation that says, no, we won't give to a religious organization because if we give to this one, then the other ones will say you should have gave to that one, and why are you doing this? And, you know, back and forth. So I don't know the reason why they don't give to religious organization. Maybe it's because they're thinking you already have a source of income. You have tithes and offerings coming in as a steady stream. It doesn't matter whether you're small or large. In their mind, they may be thinking that. So they said we're going to give to organizations who really need it. Again, grants is the number one reason why you should have a separate 501c3 so that you can do those things in the community, like have a community development corporation. And I know a lot of you probably been seeing that, community development corporation, or CDC. Basically, that's where you're doing something in the community to help more people in your community, geographical area. Your community could be, you know, within a 20-mile radius. I give you an example, and I want to say this too. There are some people who will say, can I just be real with y'all? Can I just let my hair down and be real with y'all? Because some people will say, well, you know, we're faith-based and we want to stick to faith-based, and you know, if they want to give us a grant, that they don't have to. Well, you know, that's up to you. But hear me out now. Hear me out, because I want to tell you a short story about there's an organization in Fort Worth, Texas. Anybody in Texas? Shout out to all my Texans. But it's called, I want to say Opening Doors for Women in Need. That's what it is. Sandra Stanley, she is the founder, and it's a transition home for women who are getting out of prison. Notice it didn't say God's opening door for women in need. However, it is a faith-based organization. She requires the women who are in the homes to have Bible study, but nowhere in her title does she say that, you know, God is able community development center, or God is opening doors for women. So I'm telling you to kind of separate Moses from business. I said I'm gonna be real with you today. Moses is Moses and business is business. We can break that down a few more minutes, but I just want you to think about that when you are naming your organization. Please don't say Aretha's God is Able Community Development Center. I mean, even though you may do faith-based activities there, but it's just a no-brainer for, as soon as they see the name, that they will disqualify you, because Sandra now has 3 transition homes, and one was built by the junior league. She didn't have to pay for paint, nail, nothing, furniture. It was built from the ground up by the junior league of Fort Worth. Again, it's a faith-based organization, but she separated the name, and I've seen some of her grants. We can get into that on a whole different webinar. So let's talk about the Economic Development Corporation. It's very important. Your community wants to have more people who have transition homes, or more people who are having for-profit businesses that work in conjunction with a nonprofit. Your city, your government doesn't have the capacity to do what the nonprofits do. You know that. That's why you are doing what you do in your community, because you know that you're taking the load of what the government doesn't have the capacity to do. So you have economic development corporation. It could be a small business. The SBA is part of the Economic Development Corporation. Your minority economic business incubators. There's all different types of incubators where they charge people a fee to rent their space, and that's generating income. You're generating income for employees. You're generating renting a building space. So there's so many other reasons. And then finally, one of the benefits of having a separate 501c3, if you're a church, you ever have those donors who just won't give? They just like, I ain't giving my money. I gave once this month, the first of the month, I ain't giving. But when something happens within the church, somebody's home catches on fire, there's a great need, they give. And there's some people who want to give, $10,000, but they need a tax write-off. So just think about those donors within your church who say that, I don't know what you're doing with the money, but when I see that you're buying a car for somebody who lost their car, or you're helping people get into a home, again, some people's psychology is just different. So just think about that. One of the benefits, and there are many. We could be here probably for an hour talking about the benefits for a separate 501c3. In fact, let me see in the chat what you guys are saying. Love this, love this. A lot of people say, I never thought about that. So excellent point. Yeah, tithes and offerings. That's what they're thinking about. So this is important for you to know and for you to think about. So now what I want to do is get into some of the steps to obtain a 501c3. Now I know that many of you have your 501c3, maybe somebody else did it, maybe you did it, or now you're ready to start that separate 501c3. So here are some of the steps, and I put the steps 1, 2, 3, 4 on the side because I didn't know how the graphic would show up. But the first thing you want to do is incorporate in your state. Now, again, as I said earlier, every state is different. They don't communicate with each other. Some states are not even doing it electronically. Can you believe that? Some states you still have to mail in your articles of incorporation. My state is one of them when it comes to the nonprofit, setting up the nonprofit. And so I want you to keep in mind when you're seeing the state requirements to make sure that you are reading the instructions, because I know we are the generation of do it quickly, to go online and do everything in a few minutes. And so they have created these electronic forms where you can go online and incorporate really quickly. It speeds their job up, speeds the process. They get your money, and then you have not read the instructions, where the instructions told you if you want to obtain 501c3 status, you must include that in your articles. You must include the IRS language. So they know that you're going to have to do articles of amendments to amend those articles, to change them to include the IRS service, which makes them more money. And then you can proceed with going forward with getting the 501c3. So just make sure that you are checking the instructions, make sure you have the required IRS language in there. And one of the language is that you're saying that you're going to be 501c3, because there's 27 types of 501c's, 501c1, 2, 3, all the way to 27. And there's all different types. So they range from your medical institutions to colleges to trust organizations to fraternities, C4s, all different types. So it's important that you have that language in there. Also, the language, the dissolution clause, saying that if you ever dissolve your nonprofit, that everything that was donated to the nonprofit is going to be donated to another 501c3, because remember, everything that flows through the nonprofit, it belongs to who? It belongs to the nonprofit. And so the second step is getting your EIN. Oh, one other thing I want to say about the incorporation. I would do a second check of checking to make sure that name that you love so much is not trademarked by anybody else. So that's easy to do. I didn't put that here on the screen, but make a note to go on uspto.gov. That's United States Patent Trademark Organization or Office, excuse me. USPTO, to make sure that name is not trademarked. I've seen several people who have gotten cease and desist letters from a name that they just loved and they just had to have it. And so just make sure that it is not trademarked. The second step is obtain your EIN. I know many of you have probably done it online. You can go to the irs.gov from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can apply for the EIN. It takes about 2 minutes. So sometimes they change dates and times. Just check, make sure you check the website for the dates and times. And then your bylaws. The third thing is your bylaws. So your bylaws are really your internal rules and regulations. They're for you to decide, when you're going to vote, when you're going to have meetings, a quorum, and all those internal rules that you'll have. I would say for small nonprofits, you should have them, but they are not required to be sent to the IRS when you apply for 501c3 status. A long time ago, when I was doing this, when you had to handwrite everything on the form, you did have to send a copy of the 501c3, but now you don't have to send a copy of your bylaws with the short form, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. And then applying for the 501c3. So that's one of the last things I want to talk about is, before I answer your questions, is applying for that 501c3. Now, if you have not gone to pay.gov to set up an account for setting up your 501c3 or applying for your 501c3, you would go to pay.gov. It's where they're doing everything now. And you do have to go through ID.me. I don't know if you guys have noticed that everything is getting strict. Like when I went to my accountant, she needed a copy of my driver's license. Now I'm like, why do you need a copy of my driver's license? You've never asked before. It's because the government has set up this ID.me portal where they want to make sure that they are identifying you. And so on this pay.gov, when you set up your account, you have to go through ID.me. You have to either, I can't remember because it's been a while. I've had my account for quite a long time, but I had to give my driver's license number and a whole bunch of personal things for them to identify me. So just make sure you do that. And your user fee is paid through pay.gov. What I mean by your user fee is your fee for the IRS application. So you can start your application and save it and go back to it later because maybe you need to check somebody's address on your team or whatever. But the good thing about it, once you start this, you can go back and save it. So I haven't been looking in chat because I had to work with one screen here. So this is what the IRS form 1023, and now they have a streamlined application called the 1023 EZ, and it's just like they say, it's easy to do. So I know you can do this. So the first side, from my screen, I'm looking at the application for recognition for 501c3. It's form 1023. It is 29 pages long. It requires attachments. And this is where every organization, when you complete this package for the form 1023, it's probably going to be about 50 to 100 pages, depending on what type of organization you are or what you're telling the IRS, because the more you tell them, the more you have to add to it. For example, if you say you're a church, then there's another schedule. Schedule A is for churches. Schedule B is for universities and colleges. Schedule F, I can't remember all these off the top of my head, but it's for an elderly home, as I know a lot of you want to do elderly homes. And Schedule F is also for low-income housing. Don't quote me on this because I'm doing this off the top of my head. But you will have to add the bylaws, the schedules. All this will be uploaded as one PDF when you file the form 1023. Now, the form 1023 EZ, why they call it EZ, again, because it's easy, it is only 3 pages long. And although it's short and easy, oh, by the way, the long form is $600. Always double check because they change the fees. Go back and forth, they change the fees. So double check. Right now it is $600. The easy is $275. It's only 3 pages. They ask you very few questions, but you can check a wrong box and then they will send you a letter saying, hey, explain this, and that delays your process and delays your filing. So we want to avoid those. So I want to just pause for a moment and check the chat to see if there's questions that I have missed. Okay,
Here's a quick one actually that came in. This came in through Q&A. So the EIN is federal and 501c3 is through the state. Is that how it works?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that. So the EIN and the federal is the same thing. You apply for the EIN on the federal level. Your EIN is not given, it's employer identification number. It's not given from the local, it's given from the federal government, which the IRS is under. And so it's like a social security number to your business. Just think of it that way. It's also called tax ID, and some people call it tax exempt number. That's the number you're going to put on your donation receipts. That's your EIN, is the tax exempt number.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Great question. So I'm going to go ahead and leave you with this one quote, and then I'm going to jump into your questions. I love this. The only way to do great work is to love what you do. The only way to do great work is to love what you do. And I know a lot of you love what you do. I want you to take a screenshot of this. If you need to reach out to me, if you want to connect with me for a one-on-one consultation of training and grant review, if you say, I love what you said about the 501c3, but I don't want to do it myself, I can certainly help you with that. So I want to pause and see if there's any questions in the chat or the Q&A.
Well, so far, there's a couple that have come in, but I wanted to go ahead and let people know. Someone asked, is there a way to connect with other people on today's webinar for maybe reaching out and connecting and sharing information? And it was a great idea. So what I'm going to do is in the chat, if you are interested in sharing, with other people and connecting, go ahead and put your address in the chat, maybe what you're interested in, and then I will mail that out to everybody. So that way we're not violating anything. If you don't want to participate, that's totally fine. But if you do want to, just go ahead and put your email in the chat and then what you're specifically focused on, and people can maybe find you through that chat, which I'll be mailing out with the recording that goes. So there are a couple questions that come in. So if you want to handle those, you can take them right now, Aretha, or I can take them. It's totally up to you.
Yeah, so you can go ahead and ask them. Actually, you know what? I'll read that. I'll read the Q&A. Lots
Okay.
of them coming in. I saw something in the chat. If you can grab the chat, I'll read the Q&A. Anne said, we are a food pantry housed in a church. I see that a lot. The church has a 501c3, but the food pantry is looking at getting a separate one so that we can apply for grants. Researching how to do that. Very good, and I highly recommend that. I was just talking to a pastor last night that said the same thing. They want to do a food bank. You just apply for a separate 501c3 using the streamlined form 1023. So, and just it's going to have a separate name. And I don't know, say if it's Ann's Food Pantry, it'll have a separate name, a separate EIN. And so when you start writing your grants, you'll write your grants using Ann's Food Pantry information. And because your church already has some history doing this, you can kind of merge some of that history. Say we've started the food pantry in 1999 through the ABC Church, and then we formed the 99. So you want to weave in some of that history when you're writing a grant, which I think will help. So thank you for that question. Laura says, I want to do one for other ministries outside the church. Okay, and you can do that. And I want to say, when I hear the word ministry, people use that name ministry interchangeably, because somebody will say, oh, they'll call me, I want a 501c3 for our ministry. And I have to say, is it a church or is it something else you're doing? And then they say, oh, it's something else, but be specific. And so Lori, when you do something outside your church, again, if your purpose for doing it is to help the community and you want to get grants, try not to use a religious name. This is my opinion, my advice from experience. Christine said, will there be any workshops about what to do after incorporation, like building a board, bylaws, registration, government entities for fundraising? We can certainly look into that, Jeremy. So just let me know.
And people can also reach out to you directly if they also want to know more about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's something, Christine, I guess you just thought of a workshop that we could do. So go to my website. I'm going to put my email in the chat and just email and say, hey, remember you said that you're going to do this workshop. And so we'll do that. And so thank you, Anne, for saying that. I want to make sure, I saw some in the chat. Ben said, is it possible to subcontract from the 501c to the church to support operations under the 501c3 funds. Absolutely. Nonprofits can work with other nonprofits. So yeah, absolutely. In fact, that's what a lot of nonprofits do when you're applying for those government grants. So one nonprofit has capacity to do one thing and the other nonprofit has to do capacity to do the other. And so that's why they work together to get those grants. Deb said, is there any sort of directory or resource, okay, that you can share listing organizations which are faith-based friendly for grant seeking? Grant Station, hello.
Yeah, I was going to say Grant Station.
Yeah, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, sure. Because one thing you can do when you are looking for grants is you can, at least on GrantStation specifically, specify what you're looking for. You can find funders that give specifically just to faith-based organizations, or in many cases, you can also easily exclude grant makers who do not give. There are some out there, but when you are doing your searches on GrantStation, you can go ahead and quickly, just through check boxes, decide what you want. And then you can also find many grant makers who give to a specific purpose or project and don't really care about your specific situation and scenario. And all that information we include with all of our records on GrantStation.
Yeah. So I'm just going through the chat that came directly to the host. So Demetri said, what about RFP from Department of Child Safety can apply for grants? Is that a question or a statement? Because there was no question mark. I'm not sure, but yeah, I'm not sure. So Jeremy, there may be something I missed. You can let me know.
Yeah, I've got one right here, actually. Is it possible to change the name of a current 501c3 organization that has an education component to a different name for a new 501c3 that is completely educational?
Absolutely. What you would do is articles of amendment on the state side. Once they get approved from the state, you would send a letter to the IRS with the approved amendments and then explain to the IRS that this was the name of it, but now you're changing the name to this, and we're still doing XYZ activities, which are still exempt from federal tax exempt. So that's what you would do.
Excellent. Could you explain pay.gov again? Just a quick overview. They're
Yeah.
on the site. They don't see the forms, but maybe there's something they need to do specifically.
Yeah. If you're on the site and you are logged in, obviously you're logged in the search box, just type in 1023. That's all you have to do. 1023. That's the form for 501c3. Once you type that in, it's going to come up with the instructions and how to actually do the form, actually the form itself.
So this is interesting. This is from Kelly. Please confirm that the major reason to get a 501c3 is because you want to do work in the community.
Well, no. Good question. And I'm gonna slow down on this. Confirm that the only reason to get the 501c3, the only reason to get the 501c3 is so that donors can write off what they're giving you on their taxes. Otherwise, you don't need it, because if you're gonna do good, you can do good without it. And there are a lot of people who do. There are a lot of people who've never even incorporated. They've just been going feeding people with their own money and everything and just living their life, and they're satisfied. But if you're gonna grow and you're going to start asking for donations from people like me that say I need a tax write-off, that's the only reason you need the 501c3. Yeah, lots of questions. I'm going to do these two from the Q&A and then I'll go back to you.
Sounds good.
Tracy said, if you do one for other ministries outside the church, like for the community, should you not use the word ministry or ministry? I would not recommend that, because when corporations see the word ministries, they automatically assume it's a religious organization. So that's what I'm saying. Like I gave you the example of Sandra Stanley. Her business is opening doors for women in need. It doesn't say ministries on it. And then a lot of people like to throw ministries on the end of their name. Y'all, can we be real? We love to do that. But I think, again, Moses is Moses and business business. Let me tell you about the Moses is Moses and business is business thing. A friend told me this a long time ago. Her name is Angela. Her father owned a Christian television station here where I live. And he explained to her, he said, Angela is a man in town. He's a Jewish man. He sells all these pork ribs and makes millions of dollars, but he will not touch pork because it's not kosher. It's not part of his religion. They don't eat pork. But he understands to separate Moses from business. That's why I said Moses is Moses and business is business. And you put that in the chat. Remember that. Hang on to that. Okay. Sarah says, if we create a 501c3 in our church ministry, do we need to create a separate back office, bookkeeping, etc.? I absolutely, yeah. You want to keep the accounting separate because your other 501c3, you're going to do the 990. The church is not required to do the 990 unless they have what they call UBIT, unrelated business income tax, UBIT. So that is also in that tax guide. That's on that the PowerPoint that I give you. Great question, Sarah. Julie says, our historic church already incorporated has the EIN and bylaws. We have a Massachusetts state tax exempt number. The church was the original town meeting. The church was the original town meeting house when our town was incorporated in 1735. This is a
That's
good story.
impressive. That's
Yeah, because
impressive.
I've had people that come to me that's been 100 years old. So this is good. We were debating whether to get our own 501c3 in the name of Sheffield Meeting House to be able to upgrade our facilities,
Oh,
work
yes.
kitchen for
Oh,
food,
yeah.
access to local farms, and also to host cultural offers in our sanctuary. What are your thoughts about establishing a DBA for the meeting house under the auspice of the church checkbook? Such a good question. She shared so much. If this webinar was just about that, we could be here for an hour. She shared so much because there are a lot of churches who, remember, the IRS said you don't need the 501c3, so they never got it. Why? And now you have, you're seeing other people doing things in the community and they have the 501c3 or they're getting grants because they have the 501c3. So back to her question, my thoughts about establishing a DBA. Even if you do a DBA, the DBA has to have the 501c3, okay? So we're debating whether to get our own 501c3 in the name of Sheffield Meeting House. Now, is the church name Sheffield Meeting House? I'm not sure. I'm assuming that it is. I like the name. I like the name. So a DBA it's kind of tricky. There's so many things. I'm gonna put my email in the chat for you to set up a free 10-minute consultation. I don't do free 10-minute consultations. So Julie, no, church name is First Congregation Church of Sheffield. Okay. Okay. So I like the meeting house, the Sheffield Meeting House. I like that. But why would you need to do a DBA? We'll talk about that because you and I could be on here all day. Actually, you know what? I can send you my email right here.
While you're typing that in, I can also let you know the reason why I thought that was such a good idea is since you have such a history with that location, there are so many grants, again, Grant Station right here, that focus on supporting and maintaining and upkeep on historical buildings. So that's a prime candidate. So if you had a 501c3 for that very purpose, you could apply for grants just for doing upkeep on that building alone.
Very good. Thank you, Jeremy. I see one from Barry. He says, we have a tax exempt letter from years with an exempt number, but not an EIN number. Is there a difference? No, it's the same. It's the same. And can I say this for everybody? I got a call last night from a girl that said, I set up this nonprofit and I don't want to do it anymore. I'm just tired. I don't want to do it. And, people get that way, sometimes when they're working by themselves, board members fall apart, et cetera, et cetera. And so I got her EIN. I looked her up on the IRS website, and she was revoked anyway. So she there was no need for her to tell the IRS or the state that she didn't want to have her 501c3 anymore. So your tax exempt number and EIN is the same number. So very good question. Any more that I missed?
Yeah, I've got a couple here. What Donna asked, will this recording be available to anyone? Yes. Since it's free, yes. Even if you're not a Grant Station member, yes. And can they access the Grant Station website? Actually, we'll put it on YouTube. May I just share with others? Yes, you can. So when you receive this in your email on Wednesday of next week, one more reminder, it's coming out next week. On Wednesday, just forward it to anyone you want, and they can have access and read this. There's also one that came in from Jessica, a little bit more involved. They're classified as a paraministry. I don't know what that means. Maybe you do. Under the umbrella of the United Methodist Church. Now, they can get proof of a tax exempt status through the finance administration, but they're exploring a 501(c)(3) to reflect their diverse connections and to operate as fundraising and fund finding. Good idea, bad idea.
Good idea. I've seen so many churches break away. So she's talking about that group exemption. So one big church has the 501(c)(3), and all the other churches under them use their 501(c)(3). I highly recommend you have your own. Just my opinion, I've seen many pastors come to me and do it separately, because sometimes your beliefs change, and you got to report to them, and I don't. Yeah, that's it. I don't want to get too much into that. Uh,
They can
um,
take advantage of that 10-minute, that's for sure. The 10
yeah,
minute consultation that you're offering.
yeah. Let me do this. What Tim asked: under what conditions would one have to use the 1023 rather than the 1023 EZ? That's a great question. I guess I didn't do a good job of explaining that. So let me explain that. That was a great question, and thank you for asking. So the 1023 EZ is for budgets under 50,000. And I know if you're brand new, you don't know what your budget is. You're hoping it'll be, you're guessing, but so it's based on a good faith estimate, is what the IRS says. So if you don't know if you're going to get more than 50,000 within the next 3 years, then you can use that 1023, that short form. If you know, because some people have already been getting more than 10,000, 50,000, then you go ahead and use the long form. So that was a great question.
Elizabeth asks, how do we set up a separate charity in a way that it's recognized as a subsidiary of the ministry?
Um, well, people doing things under it, they're going to be separate. They're going to be separate. Period, because they have two separate names, two separate EINs, so they're going to be separate. I hope that answers your question.
Kelly asks, and this is pretty straightforward, do you have to be a 501(c)(3) to get grants?
Well, the ones who want a tax write-off, yes, but I have seen people say, here's some money and go do good. So um, the short answer is yes, because that's the only way people can write off on their taxes. People, organizations, corporations, foundations. So that's the only way they can write off on your taxes if you are a 501(c)(3). There was something Ann said, I don't understand the difference between using the 1023 and the 1023 EZ has to do with your revenue. True. If so, what is the cutoff? Yeah, you've got to read the instructions on the forms. It'll tell you, it'll ask you, do you anticipate earning more than this amount this year? If you do, then you use this form. If you don't, then you can use this form. When you go into the pay.gov, it'll have a little checklist that you can look at to tell you whether you can use that form or not. I'm going to answer some questions that came in the Q&A again. This is what I love, more questions, because this is how we learn from each other. Sarah says, okay, she's talking to Julie. I'm in Massachusetts, and I will say that we have a DBA for our ministry, even though it's not a separate 501(c)(3), because we have a different name and do business in the town adjacent to where the congregation is.
Interesting, yeah.
So you guys know DBA is doing business as, is not like an official incorporated name. So you might want to check into that. Just kidding. But she got her email in there for you, Julie. So I'm gonna leave that in the Q&A so you can see that. Megan says, I think I'm still confused on if I want to apply for grants if the ministry is faith-based, even though the name doesn't reflect it, but the service are faith-based. How does that work? Going back to opening doors for women in need. It is a faith-based ministry. You can Google her. It's in Fort Worth, Texas. It is a faith-based ministry, but the name does not say ministry on it. I hope that helps, Megan. Tim says, can existing church be the manager of an additional 501(c)(3), or is that a bad idea? An existing church be the manager of an additional 5? No, yeah, they can. Yeah, they can. Is a 50,000 required to be the X for the base on all? I don't know I don't know. Yes, yeah, it's the base for all. Yeah, for all. Yeah. Oh, easy. Okay. 50,000 required for the easy for based on all types of yeah, income. Yeah, all types. Yes. Very good. My email is my name, Aretha Simons @gmail. Just so For those of you who missed it, Joanne, there you go. My name is Aretha Simons at Gmail. Aretha Simons at Gmail. Aretha Simons at Gmail. Any questions that you see that I missed, Jeremy?
Just a couple more that came in, and this is more of a comment that came in. Trisha mentioned as a grant writer, she could say that most grants require a 501c3, and that's very true. She's not run into a local, state, or federal or foundation grant that hasn't required it. There are some out there, but it's a very small number. And like you were saying, Aretha, sometimes someone will say, "I love your good work. Here's some money. I don't care." That is the dream, not the constant reality. So
Yeah.
501c3, strongly encourage if you want to apply for grants.
Yeah, yeah. You guys, can I ask you a favor? Give me about an hour. I had that 10-minute one off my website. Give me an hour to put it back on there so I don't get 100 emails, so that you can record get your time on the times I have available. So give me about an hour and it'll be on my website, arethasimons.com. Okay, thank you so much. Any questions that I missed? Can staff salary be included in a grant? People to support the 501? Absolutely. Absolutely. Any
Here's one. This is one might be a little too in the weeds though. Which NTEE code is recommended for charity, such as orphans, education, housing, and food?
Great. She asked about the NTE. NTE is National Taxonomy Exempt Entity. When you apply for the 501c3 on both of the applications, it's going to ask you for your code. There'll be a link for you to go to all the codes. So you have to look at the NTEs to see which one best fits you. And if you don't know, it'll say at the bottom which code you use, but you have to look through all of them to see which one. So I can't tell you off the top of my head which one would be the best, but there's hundreds of them listed. So you would choose the best one to fit you, and the IRS won't beat you up if you got it wrong, because they're going to look at your thing. Okay, Julie can't see Donna's email. Sarah's email. It's Donna's email. I don't see Donna's email. It was Sarah, but
If you're looking for it, just go ahead and put it into the chat and put the emails in the chat. That way, we're not giving out anyone's specific emails. So then you can access the chat and then see the email if you want to do that. So with that, well, you're welcome, Jessica. I'm glad this was helpful for you. We answered a lot of questions there. I'm
yeah.
sure Aretha will be happy to answer more. Again, give her some time, maybe give her an hour or two, and she'll get the 10-minute thing back on her website. But that's just for you because you attended today. So thank you again for
Yes.
spending your time with us. I hope you reach out to Aretha and ask her if you have any questions about trying to learn more about the 501c3 for your religious organization and what you can do with that. I'm glad it's been amazing. And again, in these last few moments, please go ahead and put that into the chat. Any final thoughts, Aretha, you want to leave people with before we leave for today?
Yeah, it's been so great. I know that you all are passionate about doing this, so thank you so much for attending this webinar. Please share, share, share. Once you get the video recording from Grant Station, again, in about an hour, I'm going to put the 10-minute link up. It's only going to be up for the rest of the day because I will be bombarded with free 10-minute sessions. So it's only going to be up until the rest of the day. So make sure you go to my website, arethasimons.com.
Visit GrantStation to see our latest online education offerings in the form of live webinars, interactive workshops, and on-demand learning. GrantStation.com, your fast track to funding and online education.